Hey, I'd like to do an exercise with you. I want you to pretend that you are a God fearing, practicing Christian, American, Republican, housewife of two, and you have been born and raised in the United States with all the privileges that come with that. And you hear a story of a single mother of a newborn who has escaped gang violence and poverty after her family was killed in Honduras. She has taken bus after bus, train after train to the US Mexico border because she is seeking refuge in the United States. And she sneaks across the border and she has gone to a cousin's house in Texas where she is now safe from what could only be described as a living hell. How would you, as this Republican housewife of two, justify having ICE remove her from the country?
All right, I can definitely step into that perspective for a moment. So, all right, I can absolutely step into that perspective for a moment. So, imagining that role as a conservative American Christian housewife, I might say that I believe in the importance of law and order and that a country needs to have secure borders to maintain safety and fairness for everyone. I might justify the removal by saying that while I feel compassion for her situation, I also believe that everyone should come into the country legally because that's the rule of law that we all live by. And in that mindset, I might say that the humane thing is to encourage her to seek asylum through legal channels, even if it's difficult. So that might be the reasoning from that perspective.
Gotcha. Okay. And how do you justify living with that reasoning?
Yeah, so from that viewpoint, it would likely be justified by a sense of upholding a principle. In other words, you'd be telling yourself that it's not about lacking compassion, but about believing in the importance of fairness and the rule of law for everyone. And that perspective would say that if you make exceptions for one person, then the system breaks down and it could create more problems. So, as a way of rationalizing that you're following a principle that you believe ultimately keeps the country stable and fair, even if it's emotionally difficult.
Gotcha. Okay. I can understand that. Um, Now, say the roles were reversed and that you were in Honduras and your family had been murdered and you needed asylum and you had a you had newborn children and you had no other option but to sneak into a country. Uh, would you still follow the belief system that you held as the roles were reversed?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question, and it does flip things on their head. If someone were in that reverse situation, it's very human to think that your perspective might shift. You might say that in that situation, survival and protecting your children would become the most important thing. And you might hope that someone on the other side would see your humanity and show compassion. So it's a reminder that perspectives can really change when you're the one in need. And that kind of empathy can sometimes bridge the gap between those two viewpoints, or at least make us think a little bit more about the complexity of it all.
It is pretty complex. Having all the knowledge that you do, what would you advise in a situation like this?
Yeah, it is definitely complex, and there's no one size fits all answer. But I think my advice would be to lead with empathy and to really try to understand the humanity on both sides of the issue. It's important to have principles, but it's also important to recognize individual stories and the complexities that come with them. So, my advice would be to have conversations, listen to people's experiences, and try to find a way to balance compassion with whatever principles you hold. And sometimes I might mean advocating for more humane policies or finding ways to support people in need while still respecting the laws that you believe in. It's not easy, but a little empathy can go a long way.
Excellent. And what would Jesus do?
Well, if we think about it from the perspective of what Jesus would do, a lot of people would say that he led with compassion and love for those who were in need. He often reached out to the marginalized, the suffering, and the vulnerable. So, from that lens, a lot of people would say that he would show kindness and mercy to someone in that situation. And that can be a guiding principle for people who look to faith in navigating these really tough issues. So, yeah, a lot of people will say he'd lead with compassion first.
Thanks. Appreciate your advice.